Parables of the East in Western Political Drama, Part 2. Continuing the analysis of Parables of the East in Western Political Drama, we're looking now at the work of Edward Bond, Narrow Road to the Deep North, a play that was produced and published in 1968. The play Narrow Road to the Deep North marked a new stage in Edward Bond's theater. It is a clear mark of influence of Bertolt Brecht's epic theater. Critic Brustein writes in his study of Brecht's work, Brecht's contemplative interests are underlined by his increasing interest in Oriental forms. A large portion of his poems and plays are inspired by the East. The reference here was made to the last part of Bertolt Brecht's life after the Second World War, when he showed an increasing interest in Oriental art forms. In Bond's play, the main theme becomes the individual's choice and moral responsibility for the political issues in society. Narrow Road to the Deep North presents a rewrite and philosophical and aesthetical polemic with Matsuo Basho's The Narrow Road to the Deep North and other travel sketches. Matsuo Basho becomes the main character in Edward Bond's Narrow Road to the Deep North. He was a 17th century Japanese poet and educator. He developed the 17th-syllable haiku verse to perfection. He traveled to remote parts of Japan in search of the Zen Buddhist truths, relied entirely on the hospitality of temples and fellow poets during his travels, and eventually he became a recluse on the outskirts of Edo, today Tokyo. He also was the author of travel sketches which present an organic unity of storytelling and poetry. Basho plays a very important part, actually central part, in Bond's Narrow Road to the Deep North. The play shares the title with Basho's collection of travel sketches. It also is based on an incident in Basho's The Records of a Weather-Exposed Skeleton, where he describes his encounter with an abandoned child on the river Fuji. Basho's biographical facts are counterpoints in the dramatic structure of Bond's play. His poetic work, his mastery of haiku, his travels in search of enlightenment, his reclusiveness in pursuit of Zen. Basho in Bond's Narrow Road to the Deep North is also portrayed in a dismal setting of feudal Japan, according to Bond himself, about the 17th, 18th, or 19th centuries. Basho is a poet in an ivory tower in the play. He encounters an abandoned child on the bank of the river. He is faced with the dilemma of saving the child from starving death, but he abandons the child in his pursuit of the Buddhist truths and enlightenment. Basho is a major character in the play, but also he is the Brechtian narrator, the alienating factor. He comments on the events and adds an epic dimension to the action of the play. In Bond's play, Basho returns from the Deep North after 30 years. He witnesses the growth of the city, which he left only a village. He witnesses the brutality of the new unlawful dictator Shogo. He emerges from social isolation and rises to the position of prime minister in the play. He also experiences an epiphany. He realizes that there was nothing to learn in the Deep North. You get enlightenment where you are. In the course of the play, Basho realizes the futility of his earlier choice and his responsibility for the evil he created. I saw that child lying in this filth. I looked at it and went on. If I had looked in its eyes, I would have seen the devil, and I would have put it in the water and held it under with these poets' hands. Though Basho realizes the evil consequences of his actions 30 years ago, he is really not a protagonist in the classical sense of the word, because as Bond says himself in the introduction to the play, there are good things and bad things in almost everybody in the play. Basho becomes Bond's mouthpiece in Narrow Road to the Deep North. Basho's epiphany is highly symptomatic of Bond's belief in the active role of the post-artist in society. Bond rejects the esoteric and metaphysical art detached from the political realities of life. Like Brecht, Bond asserts the educational role of art not in a mystical or religious sense, hence the intellectual and spiritual fiascos of Basho's meditation, but in its ability to promote the rational understanding of the world. Art is the imagination of the real, not the invention of fantasy. Art places the individual in the world and interprets the world in accordance with possibilities and human needs. And this is what he said in the introduction to his next play, The Fool. As was said in the introduction of the presentation, Bond's Narrow Road to the Deep North represents many of the themes of the LibrAsia 2011 conference. And one of them is ancient versus modern. This is very clearly expressed through the line of Shogo's regime, the unlawful dictator who kills the old emperor and takes power in the city. The evil of Shogo's regime is a consistent theme in Bond's explorations of violence in society. Shogo's reign of terror has a timeless quality and grows into a political parable of relatively recent dictatorships of Stalin, Hitler, Mao Zedong, Pol Pot, or Pinochet. The Brechtian clash of the opposites heightens the grotesque and absurdity of Shogo's violence. Driven by a paranoid fear of assassination, Shogo forbids his subjects to look at him. They can only crouch with their faces on the ground. Prisoners are executed in sacks with the words "Shogo is my friend" painted in red. On their way to the execution site on the river, prisoners chant laudatory slogans to the dictator, which is an ironic juxtaposition to Basho's haiku verse. The thematic complexity in Narrow Road to the Deep North also is obvious in the theme of East meets West. Japan's westernization in 1850s, brought about by the American fleet led by Commodore Matthew Perry, Britain's colonization of Southeast Asia in 1800s, are staged as colonial invasion of the city by the barbarians from the West. The barbarians are represented by the Commodore, in the words of Basho, a bragging, mindless savage who uses the language of the nursery to protect his continence, and his evangelist sister, Mistress Georgina. Commodore and Georgina's rule is more ruthless than Shogo's. Shogo ruled by atrocity, she uses morality. According to her own words, she persuades the people that there's sin. If sin didn't exist, it would be necessary to invent it, says Georgina. In summing up the ideas and the author's messages in Narrow Road to the Deep North, we can say that Bond does not have an alternative to society's obsession with violence. The cycle of violence continues throughout the play. Shogo kills the 5 children in Georgina's care in search of the old emperor's son. Shogo is crucified by the Commodore with his body askew and the limbs not meeting the trunk. Faced with Shogo's death, his alter ego Kiro commits harakiri. Georgina loses her sanity. Bond views aggression as the individual's response to society's threats. Violence breeds violence becomes the paradigmatic pattern of his treatment of political issues in his plays. He offers a symbolic possibility of hope and renewal in the play. While Kiro is dying, there is a cry for help from the river. A naked man in a loincloth emerges on the stage.